Sukui, greetings, I am Tad Larkin, the lore master of Manda-LORE, and today I'll be digging through the archives to continue elaborating on the history of the galaxy. Where we last left off in this lecture series, we saw the reorganization of the Galactic Republic under the Ruusan Reformations, the fall of Darth Bane to his apprentice Darth Zana starting the Baneite legacy of Sith Lords, and the birth and rise to prominence of Jedi Grand Master Yoda. We also saw the rise of Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious and their meddling in galactic affairs, the outbreak of the Clone Wars, and the rise of the Galactic Empire, bringing with it the Second Great Jedi Purge.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
Though the Clone Wars had formally ended, there were many who were not so receptive to Palpatine crowning himself Emperor, and yet still more clung to the ideals of the Old Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. In the now Imperial Senate itself, there were those who did not join in the thunderous applause upon Palpatine's declaration of the New Order, mainly the signatories of the Petition of the 2000, a failed committee that was formed during the waning years of the Clone Wars to attempt to have then-Chancellor Palpatine relinquish his wartime emergency powers. More than half of the signatories removed their signatures upon the declaration, and those who didn't were relentlessly questioned, arrested, or even clandestinely executed. But those who survived did so by biding their time and feigning their loyalty. Senators Mon Mothma of Chandrila, Bail Organa of Alderaan, and Garmbel Iblis of Corellia were among the most vocal, Bail respectfully constructing his criticism from a loyalist angle, while Mothma and Bel Iblis were more fiery in their criticisms against the Emperor's decrees. All three would work behind the scenes for the next 17 years to form the framework of the Rebel Alliance. The Emperor made it very clear that dissent would not be tolerated, and any dissident, rebellious, or CIS holdout world that dare challenge the Empire bore the full brunt of the newly formed Imperial Navy, and the subsequent series of conflicts over the next 3 years culminated in the reconquest of the Rim. Admiral Terranald Screed and his fleet battled separatist holdouts at Vinzoth, Benquaros, and Bemil before defeating them at Vardos, while Admirals Adar Talon and Jan Dodonna battled insurrectionists at Manda-LORE, Cymirth, and Tresamine, and after, Admiral Octavian Grant dismantled the last remnants of the Trade Federation at Farstein, and finally, the Hook Nebula. These former heroes of the Clone Wars were now the conquerors of the Outer Rim. Meanwhile, though Order 66 succeeded in bringing a majority of the Jedi to heel, not all Jedi were in the presence of clone troopers when the Order went out, and even so, some that were managed to narrowly escape their would-be executioners. Spread in diaspora throughout the galaxy, many Jedi, from minor Jedi like Das Janir, Ferris Olin, and Jax Pavan, to Jedi Masters of renown like Shaak Ti, Yoda, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, were plastered on wanted posters across the Empire. The Emperor wanted every single one hunted down and defeated. His newly anointed Sith apprentice, Darth Vader, was first and foremost in charge of hunting down these Jedi, taking on groups of stragglers at Kessel and another Jedi group at Kashyyyk during the Empire's subjugation of it. However, he quickly realized that he could not do it alone, and the Imperial Inquisition was founded. Around 30 Force-sensitive beings, some even former Jedi themselves, such as the case with Inquisitor Jarek, were trained by Vader and others to hunt down the remaining Jedi, and either turn them to the dark side of the Force, or eliminate them entirely. Apart from the conquest of outlaw sectors and exterminating Jedi, the Empire experienced growing pains on the home front as well, with worlds in the Mid-Rim, Expansion Region, colonies, and even the core, in fact the very heart of Coruscant itself, refusing to bend the knee to Palpatine. On Coruscant, Vader and Moff Tracha saved the Emperor from an early coup attempt by Headmaster Gentis of the Rythal Academy and killed the conspirators. On the core world of Ka'amas, the pacifist Ka'amasi were alarmed at the growing militarism of the Empire and preached a return to the morals of the Old Republic. And, feeling threatened by this, Palpatine hired Bothan mercenaries to sabotage Ka'amas's planetary shield generators, allowing the Empire to orbitally bombard the world. Documents were later forged attempting to implicate the ruling Bothan clans in the sabotage, which will cause problems for the galaxy later. On New Plimpto, the Empire systematically slaughtered the native Nosorians for their support of the CIS during the war. In the colonies, on Gorman, Imperial landing craft purposely landed on anti-tax protesters in the capital square. In the Mid-Rim, on Kashyyyk, the Empire raided the world to take Wookiee slaves for the Death Star, currently under construction above Geonosis and soon to be moved to Despire. And, finally, the floating cities of the Mon Calamari were sunk after they refused to relinquish their shipyards, and the water world was subjugated. In Hutt space, the region now technically fell under the rule of the Empire, and they even went as far as to draw up sector borders and appoint Moffs to rule them. However, it became clear rather quickly that the Hutts didn't take them seriously. The Empire tried to crack down on slavery within Hutt space, but the Hutt Khajiitiks recognized them for the hypocrites that they were, and eventually, an understanding was reached between the Emperor and the Khajiitiks, that neither could make the other do what they wanted. So, the Hutts agreed to pay, quote-unquote, taxes to the Empire in exchange for being left alone. By 18 BBY, an asteroid was transformed into a sort of proof of concept for the Death Star, and dubbed the Eye of Palpatine, and it was intended to be used against a refuge for Jedi younglings on Belsavis. However, it was sabotaged by Jedi Masters Callista Ming and Gaith Eris, who were from the Altician sect of Jedi, a breakaway group of Jedi that allowed their members to marry and form attachments. On the Emperor's homeworld of Naboo, Queen Apellana became increasingly defiant of the Empire, going as far as to seceding from it and harboring Jedi survivors as her personal bodyguards. Vader and the 501st put a quick end to the debacle. After enduring a year of enslavement under the Empire's boots, the Wookiees had enough and rebelled, prompting Vader to mount a second invasion of Kashyyyk, which accomplished the twofold task of re-securing the planet as well as rooting out a Jedi Knight the Wookiees had been harboring, Kento Marek, who Vader slew in front of his toddler's son, taking the boy as his secret apprentice. Vader had trained Inquisitors, Force-sensitive Imperial Security Bureau agents like Shira Bree, and the Emperor had his own Force-sensitive agents, the Emperor's Hands, and now Vader sought to keep this boy to fulfill his own personal agendas, away from the prying eyes of his master, dubbing the boy Star Killer. In 17 BBY, Grand Moff Willof Tarkin of the Seswena sector oversaw the campaign against the Separatist holdouts in the western regions of the galaxy, as fleets led by Admiral Screed and Admiral Holt smashed CIS Lost Causers and their pirate allies in spectacular battles, like Ictor, Halm, Pandexa, and the Feather Nebula. The Western Reaches campaign seemed to be the final nail in the coffin for the Confederacy of Independent Systems. However, one Geonosian named Gizor Delso failed to get the memo, discovering a deactivated battle droid army on the former CIS world of Mustafar and reactivating it, prompting swift action from Vader and the 501st Legion. Although the concurrent and subsequent years will host numerous small planetary civil wars and imperial interventions that will be glanced over in this generalized overview, the main adjutants were out of the way, and the Outer Rim effectively pacified, at least more pacified than it had been during the latter days of the Old Republic. The Empire now spent the following years consolidating its power, cranking out massive warships, recruiting humans from all over the galaxy for the Imperial Navy, and nationalizing once privately owned institutions. One oversight remained, however: the clones. The clone masters on Kamino, who had meticulously bred the finest soldiers cloned from the famed Mandalorian bounty hunter Jango Fett for the defunct Republic, now had seen their process industrialized by Arcanian and Spa'artai cloning processes, and orders for Kamino clones became less frequent, hurting their economy. In retaliation, they bred their own clone army in secret, and in 12 BBY, they announced independence from the Empire. But that was short-lived, as the 501st Legion, led by fellow clone and bounty hunter Boba Fett, swiftly put an end to their uprising. The Empire at this point began recruiting natural-born humans for the Imperial Stormtrooper Corps, as well as accepting clones from other templates. By 11 BBY, the future famous smuggler and rebel hero Han Solo took his first steps into the wider galaxy, beginning his famous adventures as a pilot for the Basadi Hutt clan before breaking ties with them after sabotaging their operations on Elysia to save his first love, Bria Theron, and joining the Imperial Naval Academy on Carida in 10 BBY. In 7 BBY on Faline, an Imperial research center began experimenting with a biological weapon. However, when it escaped containment, Vader ordered the planet to be orbitally bombarded, killing 200,000 Faline, including the ruling Shizor family, creating a rift between the Sith Lord and the Vigo of the reorganized Black Sun crime syndicate, Prince Shizor. A cataclysm was unleashed upon the Outer Rim world of Tund in 5 BBY, when a Croak named Roker Gepta irradiated the world with a biological agent, after infiltrating and becoming one of the infamous Sorcerers of Tund, and stealing their secrets, wiping out the Tungal species and the last remaining population of pure-blooded Sith, long thought extinct until then. As luck would have it, in 4 BBY, famed gambler and future rebel hero Lando Calrissian won the YT-1300 Corellian light freighter Millennium Falcon from 6 Truvi in a game of Sabacc, and with it, he and his droid Vuffy Ra commenced their famous adventures. From discovering the mind harp of Sharu in the Rafa system and awakening the species from their 25 millennia-long intellectual regression, to helping defend the smuggler's moon of Nar Shaddaa from Imperial interlopers, and saving the Oswaft at the Battle of Thon Baka Nebula, Calrissian had already built quite a reputation for himself before being swept up by the Alliance in later years. By 3 BBY, the larger resistance movements fueled by the efforts of Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and a teenaged Leia Organa began ramping up their raids on Imperial convoys and outposts, chief of which were Garm Bel Iblis's Corellian Resistance, which he formed after a failed assassination attempt on his life forced him to resign as senator and go into hiding. It is also at this time that the training of Starkiller is deemed complete by Vader, and on board the structure of his future Executor-class Superstar Destroyer flagship, still under construction at the Fondor shipyards, he revealed to him his plans to overthrow the Emperor, and the part he would take in it as his secret apprentice. Now in his early 20s, Starkiller's first task was to hunt down and kill Jedi Master Ram Kota, who refused to command clone troopers during the war and opted to recruit and train his own militia forces instead, allowing him to survive Order 66 and take his own fight to the Empire. In a specially designed infiltration craft, the Rogue Shadow, piloted by fighter ace Juno Eclipse, Starkiller traveled to Nar Shaddaa, where Kota's forces were attacking a Sinar Fleet Systems orbital TIE fighter factory, and engaged the Jedi General in a duel, blinding the man and sending the remnants of the orbital facility hurtling towards the smuggler's moon's surface. Though unconfirmed, Starkiller reported back to Vader that Kota had been eliminated, and received his subsequent targets, hunting down and killing crazed Jedi Master Kazdan Paratus on the junk world of Roxas Prime, and finally Jedi Master Shaak Ti, one of the last Jedi Council members, on beautiful but deadly Felucia. Starkiller had seemingly passed all of Vader's tests. However, for all of his carefulness, the Emperor's spies had discovered and tracked him, and Sidious saw to it personally that Vader kill his secret apprentice in front of him to prove his loyalty, which he did, later reviving his battered apprentice. His body recovered and revived, Vader then tasked Starkiller with rounding up all of the Emperor's enemies, rebels, dissidents, and outspoken critics to band together and provide a distraction, which would allow him and Vader to strike at the Emperor. After rescuing Juno Eclipse from execution, they thought the perfect place to start would be finding Rom Kota, who Starkiller was certain was alive after their duel on Nar Shaddaa, despite his report to Vader, and he finally tracked him down to a seedy cantina on Bespin in Cloud City. The drunken former Jedi Master who believed his connection to the Force was severed reluctantly agreed to help Starkiller on his mission, and informed him of his contact in the Senate, Bail Organa. But before they could meet, they had to break out Leia, who was being held captive on Kashyyyk by Imperial Captain Stern. Not only did Starkiller manage to find and free Leia, but also helped free the local Wookiee slaves, and even discovered his family's old home, where he was shown visions of his parents' brutal murder at Vader's hands. If he hadn't already been disillusioned with his master after he killed him without a second thought, he was now. The problem with trying to contact Bail was that he himself got captured in search for another Jedi to rescue his daughter when Kota went missing. And back on Felucia, Starkiller, now taking up his old family name, Galen Merrick, dueled Maris Brood, Shaak Ti's apprentice who fell to the dark side after he had killed her master, and, once defeated, he spared her life, agreeing to turn her back on the dark side of the Force. Once free, Bail and Leia went off to gather their compatriots. With 2 Jedi and seemingly the Force on their side, 17 years of planning was soon coming to fruition for the last remaining senators still loyal to the principles of the Republic. The time was now to gather his allies and coordinate. In 2 BBY, on Corellia in its polar region, Mon Mothma, Garm Bel Iblis, Bail Organa, Leia via holocom, Rom Kota, and Galen Merrick gathered around a crumbling stone altar, while Bail made his declaration of rebellion against the Empire, and after, they all signed the Treaty of Corellia, formally declaring the alliance to restore the Republic. Not long after, Vader and his men burst through the door. Merrick was confronted and thrown off a cliff, and the rebel leaders were captured. It was during this confrontation that Vader revealed the truth. Starkiller was merely a tool to gather all of the Emperor's enemies in one place, so they could be rounded up and eliminated all at once. He had never planned to overthrow his master, at least not with Starkiller. Juno recovered Galen in the Rogue Shadow, and with the aid of Force meditation, he discovered that the Alliance leaders were being held on the Death Star, nearing completion orbiting the planet Despire in the Outer Rim. On board the Death Star, Galen selflessly sacrificed himself, dueling both Vader and the Emperor until his death, while Kota and Juno evacuated the Alliance leaders to safety. In a later ceremony on Kashyyyk to finalize the Corellian Treaty, Leia, this time there in person, unveiled the new insignia of the Alliance to restore the Republic, the family crest of Galen Merrick, recovered from Kento Merrick's dwelling. It would now serve as a symbol of hope for all of the freedom fighters of the galaxy to rally behind and combat the Empire's tyranny. This ends my findings on the Dark Times. Stay tuned for the next transmission of this lecture series, where the Rebellion era will be discussed. Special thanks to my patrons, Wildcat144, The Grand Pope, Zexend, JTrips1997, Wirefox Terrier, AJ Can't Think of a Good Pun Right Now, Dave the Grave, Zim the Despot, Matt Patton, Trav, Cal Scarata, Nate Legends Fan 95, Angry Mutt, and JJ Plagiarisms. If you'd like to support this channel, please visit my Patreon to find out how. Link is in the description. In the meantime, keep your comm channels open for future transmissions, and don't forget to subscribe. Tad Larkin, out.